And what we're seeing is that more and more of the decisions that we are making are being framed in this lens of diversity, equity, inclusion. And unfortunately, I argue that the outcomes, although maybe the intentions are good, and I understand that it's a noble cause, I get it, but sometimes that you can have good intentions and poor outcomes. And I think that what we're seeing is that the students are not having better outcomes. I think that this is alienating students. I think that they are walking on eggshells. They're interacting less. This isn't breeding the culture that we wanted in academia. I didn't realize that me speaking out about this was going to become as big news as it did. So I don't really know how to change this. Unfortunately, as you know, this is a huge industry. Many billions of dollars are being spent on this. So this is going to be an uphill battle, but I'm hoping that bringing some light to this and discussing this in a calm manner and discussing some of the outcomes that maybe people don't realize will hopefully start to get folks to start to rethink some of these.
You know, Professor, the last time I looked, the University of Alabama, in a state that's pretty conservative. And if this is happening there, it must be happening everywhere. But I wonder on campus, you mentioned the kids. I mean, are the students, are they in favor of it? Is the faculty in favor of it? The board, the president? What's happening on the campus itself is pushing this ideology?
Yeah, Sean, that's a really great question. So I think that it's complex. I think part of what we're experiencing is that the universities are beholden to federal funding agencies, particularly in the STEM fields. So as local and state funding has decreased in universities, what you've seen is tuition rise, but also their reliance on federal funds. And in order to receive these federal funds, you have to tote the line of this ideology. Otherwise, you don't get the grants, and thus the universities rely on that money, and so they're somewhat being forced into this. I think you're right that there's probably less of this in Alabama than in most other institutions. Many of the emails I've received say, oh, you think you got it bad? Listen to this.
Alabama professor criticizes woke agenda at colleges, calls for educational integrity.
You haven't been paying enough attention to the fact that our nation's culture is not only created in our schools, but that it is our children who are leading the development of that culture in our schools. Adult authority is long gone. So here I am, ringing the alarm. In 20 years, many of us will be retired or sadly dead. And the children in our schools will be in important and influential positions in our institutions. As G.K. Chesterton said, the true soldier fights not because he hates what is in front of him, but because he loves what is behind him. Well, I'm asking, how much do you love your country? How much do you love the values that you claim to defend? Do you love them enough to tweet under your own name? Do you love them enough to change your child's school to one that's less woke and ignore the impact on your social status? Do you love them enough to do more than simply chat to your friends who already agree with you at dinner parties? For heaven's sake, man, stand up and be counted. As Russell Crowe says in the film Gladiator, a clip I regularly play for my staff, hold the line, stay with me. What we do in life echoes in eternity. Will your life echo hollow with cowardly hypocrisy, or will it echo with courage, valiance, and honor? The choice is yours. Strength and honor be with you all. Now get yourselves to detention.
Catherine Birbelsing highlights issues in woke schooling practices during speech.
Of course it's racism. It's anti-white racism. When an institution is discriminating against people on the basis of their race and ethnicity, it's clearly racial discrimination. And what this is really showing us, what it's a symbol of, and this is important, is what lies at the heart of this woke mind virus that's taken over the public sector institutions, because it's important. It's what my friend Professor Eric Kaufman, he's written a brilliant book on woke ideology. He says it's the anti-majority, pro-minority impulse. That's what is at the heart of the woke mind virus. You think badly about the majority, and you think only good things about racial, sexual, gender minorities. And that is basically the impulse that drives the whole thing. So white British kids, bad. Black British kids, good. Straight white men, bad. You know, LGBTQ plus DTPCZ, good. And the point is...
I think you missed a few letters off that.
The point is, though, in all seriousness, our institutions have been politicised. They've been politicised. They're openly biased. We need to reform these institutions. This is the security services, for goodness sake. Security services doing this. They're supposed to represent us and defend us.
Political professor Matthew Goodwin critiques internship exclusion. Policies cites woke ideology as detrimental.
A Christian teacher who was banned from teaching for misgendering a pupil has lost his high court battle to get his job back. 34-year-old maths teacher Joshua Sutcliffe was banned from the classroom last year after being found guilty of, quote, unacceptable professional conduct. This involved him saying, "Well done, girls," to 2 children, one of whom was a girl that's identified as a male. And despite launching a legal appeal, the judge has now concluded that Mr. Sutcliffe, quote, fails to understand or accept the harm that he caused vulnerable children in his class by refusing to use their preferred pronouns, and upheld his ban from British classrooms. I'm joined now by the man himself, Joshua Sutcliffe. Joshua, so this is it's getting very convoluted. You've been to court and you're going to go to the Court of Appeal again. Just take us back to what happened in class. You refused to use a child's pronouns. Why didn't you just go along with it?
Well, I think my Christian convictions, led me to not use pronouns at all. I just thought a sensible approach would be to just not use pronouns. But as you read in your opening statement, that wasn't good enough. And the judge, I think, has made an egregious decision. I think he showed zero understanding of my Article 9 and Article 10 rights. I thought it was a bit of a pantomime court, in all honesty. I was instructed, as you read there, that I should have celebrated the pupil's transition, and I'm clearly not a believer in leading children down a path of mutilation and down a dangerous path of taking strong drugs and so on. So I stand by my convictions, and I'm hoping, this I believe is a really important case for our nation, because obviously I have quite strong Christian convictions, but this is probably a more universal belief that we shouldn't be leading young people down this dangerous path, and that is what the principal argument in the court was.
So you weren't obliged by law to use the pronouns, were you? So on what basis were you denied by the High Court today, or a few days ago?
Well, exactly. I wasn't denied by law. The head teachers of the school and the leadership team thought it appropriate for me to use the child's pronoun. If anything, they should be banned from the profession.
Teacher loses High Court battle over pronoun use. Sparks debate on language and identity.
I'm not talking about cuisine, I'm talking about customs. And I think that cultures where women are told that they should not work, I would knock on doors, I'm sure Penny and Jake had this, you'd knock on doors and you'd see somebody at the door who says, oh, I can't speak to you, I will get my husband. I don't think that's as equally valid as our culture. But the point I was making in the op-ed was about immigration. That immigration is something which we need to make sure we get right. We didn't before. And there were 3 things I said we needed to do. 1, numbers matter. I was quite surprised that Rob actually misrepresented what I've been saying. Numbers do matter. Culture matters even more. Who comes into the country is absolutely critical. And leadership. You need to start from the top. It's no good simply saying we're going to lower immigration and outsource it. It has to come very much from the Prime Minister himself or herself.
Are you saying, though, that if somebody in their culture who lives here in the UK, who might be a British citizen, who answered the door to you and said, I won't speak to you, I'd like you to speak to my husband instead, are you saying, you have said their culture is less valid, are you saying that people with those beliefs shouldn't be welcome in the UK?
I am saying that if we want to have a well-integrated society, we need to make sure that we have a shared culture and a shared identity. This is a multi-ethnic society. That's obvious. I'm a black woman sitting here talking to you. But there is a difference between being multi-ethnic and being multicultural. I grew up in a place that was multicultural, and yet everybody looked the same. Conflict arises when you emphasize difference. We need to emphasize the thing that we share. Being British, British values, the things that we talked about, freedom, equal rights, personal responsibility, not discriminating people because of their sexual orientation. There are some cultures that do that. I don't think that a culture that thinks gay people should be stoned is as valid as ours. This is not a controversial thing to say.
But aren't you, by making this point, which people will judge for themselves, they will maybe, I'm sure many people will be interested to hear what you say, aren't you, in fact, emphasising difference by making this point? You are saying that if somebody lives in this country already, they answered the door to you here, and they said, I'd rather you spoke to my husband, you are judging their culture to be less valid than your own. You are emphasizing that difference.
What are you suggesting that politicians should do in that case then? That we should just accept everything, that everything is fine, and that we should not comment on what kind of social relations we should have? I don't think that's right. It is our job to make sure that the people who come into the country are people who love this country, who want it to succeed, and I want this country's culture to stay the same. I left another country and came here because I thought it was better. I don't want this place to turn into the place that I was running away from.
Conservative pundit clashes with BBC host over illegal immigration policies.
And some individuals prefer they as a pronoun. Like meat or bot, they are my best friend.
We got kids that can't read and write, and then we're going to teach them incorrect grammar. I mean, it's ridiculous, okay? Who gave permission to talk about this? There's two genders. If you're born with a and you have testicles, that's just anatomy. You're a male. If you have a vagina and ovaries, you're a female. A man cannot menstruate. A man cannot lactate and breastfeed a child. You cannot give birth if you're a man. If you want to be an adult and do whatever you want with your life, I'm okay with that. Don't push this ideology on children. I'm not going to work in a district that's okay with that. You need to make a clear statement on how many genders are there, because parents they're already pulling their kids out of public school. They're doing homeschool options. They're going online. It's going to increase as this liberal ideology comes into our schools. This isn't a political indoctrination camp, okay? It's public education.
Teacher challenges. Liberal bias in education, advocating for academic diversity.
Nurse, I'm training to be a psychotherapist at the Tavistock. So I was in my 3rd year of training, and I got sent this lecture called Whiteness, a Problem for Our Time.
Whiteness, a Problem for Our Time?
Yeah, so it essentially said that all white people are racist, and it used phrases like white ignorance, white fragility. It's basically critical race theory. That's what it was, a whole hour. And it wasn't presented as a debate or a theory. It was presented as though this is true. So I responded to this and just simply said, you know, this is an ideology. It's actually not part of clinical psychology or psychotherapy, and we need to be aware that not everyone likes these ideas, which I thought was quite a mild, reasonable response. I got pulled into a meeting after that, and I was told that essentially my views were inappropriate. And that I needed to do more learning about diversity.
Educate yourself?
Yes, educate myself, yeah, exactly. And I was told, so I said, well, my view of not being racist is not judging a person by the colour of their skin, treating everybody equally. And they said, well, at the Tavistock, we see that as discredited and outdated.
Nurse objects to mandatory racist ideology training, calls for professional neutrality.
I thought once I graduate high school, things will be different. And I couldn't have been more wrong, because university was only 10 times worse. First of all, every class started with the land acknowledgement and how we were all on stolen land. And of course, every class we had to go around the room and tell everyone our pronouns so that we don't misgender anybody. There was constant talk about how white people were inherently racist. Even if you don't believe you're racist, you are racist. We had to write a certain thing to get a good grade. And then the teachers and students would openly talk about their hatred for America. I didn't quite expect people to be proudly saying they were communists, for example, or to have a poster of Marx in their dorm. And as someone whose grandparents escaped the Soviet Union, that for me was also another moment where I really could not justify spending that kind of money on what was really an indoctrination camp.
She breaks away from progressive activism, citing hypocrisy and danger of enforced conformity.
You can go into any business and specifically request people who are allies. I just did it. I'm at a Mexican restaurant, and I said, hey, I would like to specifically request to be set with somebody who is LGBTQ or trans positive, because that's how I'm spending my money today.
Ah, good for you.
And if they say, oh, I don't think we have anybody like that, you can leave. Anyway, I just want you to know you can do that. You can also walk out if they're like playing Fox News or showing Trump. You can just, whoop, you can just walk right out.
You're not very tolerant, huh?
They can't stop you. There's nothing you need there anyway. Do you really want to be around those people and that vibe? Do you want to eat with that kind of energy going on in the air? Gross.
Why are you the way that you are?
Leftists suggest patrons should demand LGBTQ allies as waiters or leave restaurants.
So when we talk
why
about,
are they at a disadvantage?
Why are they at a disadvantage? We can talk about black people in particular. We can talk about redlining and housing discrimination. We can talk about the after effects of slavery and debt peonage that no one talks about. I noticed that I never see you guys like cover Daily Wire cover like anything when it comes to the history of black people. That accurately explains where we are at today, because the last chattel slave released in America was actually in 1942. And that's not like a crackpot theory. That's because right after segregation, or right after slavery, the South didn't kind of just like give up and be like, oh, you got our slaves, our economy's just gonna go along now. They attempted to have a system in which they re-implemented it.
Oh, look,
So
there
basically
are
what
over
they would
9
do-
million slaves going around today, not in the United States.
Yeah, that has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. So,
how does it not?
Because we're not talking about the historical, or we're not talking about the context of people who are
No, I'm just
living
pointing out
slavery conditions around the world.
I'm saying slavery is practiced everywhere around the world today.
What does that mean?
It means forced servitude.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying what does slavery mean. What does it mean that is practiced in multiple places and everywhere today? Does that mean it's okay?
No, it's very bad. But what I'm saying is
then
we're basically the only guys that ever stopped it in all of human history. We in the West, yeah.
That's funny. What do you mean by we in the West?
I mean, Europe and the countries that came out of the European colonies are the only part of civilization ever that decided to end the practice of slavery. And they did so for explicitly Christian
Where do you
reasons.
think that slavery was most popular?
It was the Muslim pirates who were some of the largest traders in slavery.
That's the sheer.
And-
when it comes to the trade of the Barbary slave trade.
No, not
sheer.
just-
Yeah, I'm talking about that. The Barbary pirates. That's sheer number-wise, like compared to the transatlantic slave trade with African Americans in particular.
Yeah.
It's a bigger number.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, where do you think it was most popular? You're taking that one instance
You're
of
saying
slave
today,
trading.
or
No, I'm talking about historically. You're taking that one instance of slave trading, and you're neglecting
No,
all
there
the
are
slavery that was
others.
going around in Western countries. If you could count up that number, that's significantly more than the Barbary slave.
I'm saying even like slavery today, for instance, in Africa, is still practiced. There's a candidate for the president of South Sudan who himself was a slave and has been speaking out about the problems of slavery all around the world.
Okay.
At the height of the transatlantic slave trade, there were more slaves who were held in Africa than were shipped over to the New World. So I'm saying this, and this has been true in East Asia.
Oh,
it's been true in the Middle East.
And this is
So
because,
this
this
has
is
been true
because
for
you're
all of history.
failing to draw a distinction between what slavery we're talking about. These societies did have slavery, and that, again, has nothing to do with American history. But when we look at
There's
the
a lot to do with the history of slavery.
No, I'm talking about around the world. The fact that every other nation or other nations practice slavery has nothing to do
And
with the
continue to
context.
throughout every other
So
region
does
of the world.
America. If you look up any study, if you look up any source that tells you how many slaves there are in the world, they'll say there's like 7 million in Africa, and they'll give you a number about 400,000 to 1 million in America
Because
based
of
on
sex
their
slavery.
criteria.
Sex slavery.
Because
of,
of sex slavery,
of the people being held by the cartels on the open border.
Yeah,
That's
so
true. We should stop that.
in the United States,
Yeah,
literally in our country.
Because, for instance, like our southern border's open, and so the cartels.
Our southern
enslave-
border's open?
Yeah, we have over 3 million people a year come into the country illegally, so it's open.
Does that mean that it's open?
Effectively, yeah. If you can't stop 3 million people from crossing your border, you probably have a pretty open border.
Do you have anything to compare that to number-wise?
Yeah. So even 5 years ago, the number was down to about 2,000 people a day, which at that
Wait a
time was an
minute.
all-time high.
Is it 3 million a year?
Over 3 million.
I'm genuinely concerned because I believe that it was around 1.
It's not. It's much higher than that.
But
we have 1 million legal immigrants who come in per year, which is also a shockingly high number, completely out of accord with any other country on earth and any other time in history. But we also have many more millions of illegal aliens crossing into the border per year.
Michael Knowles engages in a heated debate on slavery with woke student.
We right now have a white supremacist that is sitting in the White House. He is backed up by other white supremacists. And if you really want to know who the criminals are in this country, you can Google it. You don't have to trust me. But the people that commit 80% of the most violent crimes in this country are white supremacists. Yet for whatever reason, they sit and they serve at the pleasure of the president. They are the ones that were there on January 6th, tearing our democracy down physically. And now we have them tearing us down right here from within.
Reverend Jasmine Crockett makes controversial claim about violent crimes, questioned for data accuracy.
So earlier, I heard you call Washington a den of thieves, and I want to get your opinion on why is Donald Trump any different from all the other thieves that are in Washington right now?
If Trump was like all the rest of them, they would not have impeached him twice, indicted him 4 times, and he would not have to survive the assassination attempts that he has. Because he threatens to expose and uproot the entire cabal and the cartel that has been making everybody in this audience poorer and them richer.
Same cabal that allowed him to become a billionaire?
Him becoming becoming a billionaire was building great hotels and buildings, not
right, off of a loan from his father.
This is interesting. People criticize the loan. If I gave you $1 million, could you turn it into $5 billion?
Probably not.
So it's pretty talented for Trump to turn $1 million into $5 billion, yeah?
Well, when you come from a dynasty of businessmen, it's kind of expected you pick it up.
Okay, I'm not going to get into that. Easy to minimize the success of entrepreneurs when people have built nothing in their life.
Charlie Kirk counters students' accusation against Trump, defends with facts.
You premised your question on the suggestion that men who identify as women, they actually have the brains of women, right? And women who identify as men, they actually have the brains of men. So I would ask you, could you tell me a little bit more about the differences in the brains of men and women? How do men and women differ by their brains? Would you say one is a little smarter than the other, you know, one's a little sharper, or those women, maybe they're a little more emotional, men, they're a little better at, you know, keeping a level head. What would you say is the difference between the male and the female brain?
So some of the research that they've shown is different sizes of different portions of the brain. I don't have the actual, like, facts in front of my face. I simply only have, like, the actual findings of the research.
I raise the question because I think you've unwittingly accepted a premise that is contrary to the liberal point of view and probably to a polite conversation, which is that men and women have these fundamentally different brains. And so if you're saying that men and women are distinct categories, and for that reason perhaps we ought to do away with some of the lies of the feminist movement and some of the lies of the homosexual rights movement, that's fine by me. But I think that these claims are a little bit dubious. And it also undermines the premise of transgenderism. The premise of transgenderism is that one's true self is not necessarily dependent upon one's body, so that one's sex is biologically determined, but one's gender expression is not biologically determined. It's socially constructed and can be whatever one wants it to be. But the case that you've just presented for transgenderism is different than that. What you're saying is that actually transgenderism is biologically determined because the brain is an organ of the body. So what you're really claiming is that these men who claim to be women, they just are biologically women. So you're free to pursue more studies on this. The studies that I've seen are pretty scant, pretty weak, and are not particularly persuasive. But sure, you can have all of those studies.
Michael Knowles challenges misconceptions about neurological science in transgender debate.
Look them in the eye. Come on, hold your face up. Look at him. Let him see you. This is him. Look at it. What's your name? Tell us your name. Give me that ID again.
Giving you the ID, I showed it to you.
So what?
I showed you the ID.
You do what?
I showed you the ID.
Could you let me see the ID again? Huh?
No.
No? Will someone else ask him for the ID? Will you ask him for it? He won't let me see it again. You didn't see it. You didn't see it. They didn't see it.
Maxine Waters faces criticism for confrontational behavior at Department of Education.
With a full-on crisis in our democracy, as federal workers are literally locked out of their offices while operatives working for a private citizen essentially take over our government. Their tactics include turning off our federal websites, deleting government-funded research that you, the taxpayer, paid for to impose speech codes, bullying news organizations by demanding interview transcripts, implementing an FBI purge, locking federal workers out of their computers, and even turning them away at their offices while giving themselves, without congressional or any other authorization, full access to the personal data of tens of millions of Americans, including Social Security recipients, FBI agents and officials, military and government contractors, and every single employee of the federal government. All of that data in private hands that you did not authorize, even if you voted for Donald Trump. This as Trump installs unqualified minions at the heads of every federal agency, knowing that they wouldn't stop this even if they knew how. At least when he's not threatening multiple trade wars or vowing to launch a new age of American imperialism by colonizing the indigenous people of Greenland and the Panama Canal, all while congressional Democrats issue strongly worded letters, plus holding a press conference today, and congressional Republicans sit back and let the federal government they work for collapse all around them, while they occasionally beg Trump for tariff mercy for their states. if this were happening in any other country right now, I promise you, I'd be on the air calling it a coup. This was the scene today at the United States Agency for International Development, better known as USAID, where protests erupted after workers were ordered by email, if they could even access their emails, to not report to the office and to work from home instead, despite the so-called DOGE directives just a week ago that all workers must work from the office 5 days a week. A group of Senate and House Democrats were blocked from even entering the agency's headquarters in Washington, D.C.
Joy Reid, accused of experiencing ideological bias leading to on-air meltdowns.
Should I, as a female, be forced to get changed in front of a male?
Because but this is, again, the conversation about where you view gender and somebody's right to self-autonomy.
I've got no interest in how someone views their own gender. My question was, why should I, as a female, be forced to get undressed in front of a male?
But if we're referring to a trans woman, then that is a woman.
No, a trans woman is a biological male. So I'm asking you again, why should I, as a female, be forced to get undressed in front of a biological male?
Right, but if somebody has a gender,
answer
for example,
that question.
Well, nobody's making you do that.
Yes,
Michelle.
yes, you do. There's cases going through the courts at the moment. I can think of one such case in the NHS where some nurses are taking action because they were forced to share a changing room with a gender-neutral changing room where there was a trans, what you call a trans woman, i.e. a biological male, using those facilities. So yeah, it actually does happen.
Right.
So I ask you again, why should I, as a biological female, be forced to share and get undressed in front of a biological male?
No. I will say trans men are men, trans women are women. That is my opinion, and I think that we need to respect
So we haven't
people's-
answered it. So basically what you're saying is I, as a biological female, have to get changed in front of some fella
What you're
because
saying
you
is that
say the label is...
that transgender people are... Do you think that trans people exist?
Debate over gendered changing rooms. Escalates. Woman defends traditional spaces.
Can't wait until American women can't get blueberries for their smoothies. I cannot wait until there is a full crackdown on all small businesses, as if that's going to be the solution to the immigration problem.
Berries for your smoothies? She can't wait. That's the punishment. Oh, you know, all these illegals, they're just my nice housekeeper, Rosario, who comes every Tuesday. Why do you hate Rosario? She's so sweet. She makes enchiladas. And that's like your understanding of illegal immigration is the berries for your smoothie. People are and then people like that go on TV and it's like the CNN host, it's like, that was kind of stupid.
Concerns raised over agriculture. Impact. If illegal immigrants are deported by this wokey.
Not a she.
You're not a she?
No, I already told you I go by they, them.
They and them. They and them mean multiple people.
I go by they, them. So you can ask me, or if you don't get it, you can just say my name. You can say, Parker, would you like to present now?
That makes no sense. What were you born as?
That's none of your business.
Teacher refuses to use preferred pronouns. Stands by linguistic convictions.
Do you think that America is a country worth saving, or is it too late?
I think that we are a country worth saving. I think that sometimes saving something means changing it. I think that sometimes saving something means letting things fall away. I think sometimes it means drastic changes, revolutionary changes, radical changes. But I think that the people of this country are worth saving, are worth educating, are worth existing. I think that we started with a beautiful promise that was never fulfilled for anyone in this country and was never meant to be fulfilled for everyone in this country. And I think that that is what it comes down to for me, is how do we take that original premise and turn it into something that can actually exist.
Yeah. Liberal calls for revolutionary change in America sparks controversial discussion.
A very interesting video of a guy, he was at a school board meeting, and he was reading from the book that the little kids these are being taught from. And it got very graphic. And so parents in the room, in the school boarding, start to say, please, it's too much. We're at a school board meeting. And he said, okay, it's okay for you to read this to your children, but I can't read it here among the adults? Yeah. Now, excuse me if I told that story before, but it bears repeating. I mean, it's not a story. I saw it. It's again, one reason I like to watch things like that is because, okay, now I'm getting stuff firsthand. I'm not getting a New York Times report of what happened at the school board meeting. I'm seeing it.
Well, I think you're right that there's this fringe element on both left and right.
Bill Maher exposes adult content in children's educational materials.
Not only did I see social studies curriculum was being, taught from a left-wing perspective, I noticed what should be a footnote in a U.S. history book was being blown out of proportion into an entire lesson or like a week of lessons. For example, like Zoot Suit riots or the Bracero program or Chinese Exclusion Act. All three things are black marks in American history that need to be learned from. However, spending so much time on them is political, whereas then our founding fathers are minimized into footnotes. I feel like I should have been spending a week or two on them.
A teacher's crusade against woke principles in education gains attention.
The one I find most disturbing of all is of a third grade teacher trying to talk about sex with 8-year-old students. These are 8-year-old children that she is trying to hold a sexual orientation class with. A parent shared their concern and their objection to it and pulled their kid out. And instead of this teacher being concerned of what she did wrong, she goes to a district employee and asks for ways of how she can continue to teach sexual orientation to her third grade class. This wasn't just any sexuality class. This was specifically designed 3 days a week. She taught LGBTQ curriculum in her class.
Christian mother confronts transgender issues in school. Advocates for traditional values.
When you talk about critical race theory, which is pretty much going to be teaching kids how to hate each other, how to dislike each other, that's pretty much what it's going to, that's pretty much, I don't care what you say, it's pretty much what it's going to all come down to. You're going to deliberately teach kids, this white kid right here got it better than you because he white? You're going to personally tell a white kid, oh, the black people are all down and suppressed. How do I have 2 medical degrees if I'm sitting here oppressed? How did I get, first of all, time up, because I only got 5 minutes now, 5 minutes. 2 medical degrees, no mom, no dad in the house, worked my way through college, sat there and hustled my butt off to get through college. You gonna tell me somebody that looked like all y'all white folks kept me from doing that? Are you serious? What's sickening about this whole thing is what y'all doing right now is already something I do in my community right now to speak out against stuff because black folks are getting told by other black folks, oh, you know you ain't gonna be able to do nothing out there in the world because them white folks ain't gonna let you get no, oh, you know you're not gonna be able to do it here because the white man gonna keep you down. Well, how did I get where I am right now if some white man kept me down? How am I now directing over folks that look just like you guys in this room right now? How? What kept me down? What oppressed me? I worked for myself from off the streets to where I am right now. You gonna sit here and tell me this lie of critical race theory? Of this the reason why black folks can't get ahead because of white folks? Are you kidding me? This is what we come to now. I can't believe we even talking about this right now. The last thing I'm gonna say right here is something that's crazy. Martin Luther King said he wanted his kids to grow up in a world where they are judged by the contents of their what? Their character, not their skin. If they letting this stuff go on right now, it is absolutely doing the complete reverse of what he's doing. So when February comes, don't talk about Martin Luther King. When February comes, don't talk about Black History Month. If y'all gonna sit there and just pretty much pee on his grave with this nonsense, that's exactly what's about to happen. When it all comes down to it, the person that's gonna be suffering from this, the one's gonna be hurt from this, is the kids. 10 years from now, if this stuff goes on, whose fault is it gonna be? Whose fault is it going to be? Who we going to look back on and blame for this? Because this is stuff we talking about right now. This stuff is going on right now. I do this stuff on a daily basis. I'm in the hood. I'm in the communities. I'm out there with folks in their face. I've been doing this stuff since I was 18 years old, talking to black folks. And you know what? None of them are buying this nonsense. None of them are. But if you want to implement this into the school system, I guarantee you to the day that I die, I'm going to be the very person right there debunking stuff, tearing stuff down, letting them know they can do exactly what I did and get exactly where I am by putting themselves to work and getting there. And ain't not one white person ever gonna keep any of them from getting there.
Black father denounces critical race theory at school. Board meeting defends educational equality.
Watch Candace Owens run rings around this woke teacher.
But there is research and science that shows that when you have a teacher that looks like you do better.
You're talking about building relationships. They're actually failing when it comes to actually teaching these kids things. This is why all the inner city communities are failing black children because they're focusing on the art and not the actual facts.
You're saying that
Across
faculty of
5
color are not
schools in
effective?
Baltimore, which is an inner city, which focuses, I suppose, on the art of teaching, they couldn't find a single black child, that was proficient in reading and writing because they think that having somebody who looks like you somehow means that it's going to be better. And also, when we talk about these quotas and someone says, well, there's this many white people teaching and there's this many black people teaching, welcome to America. Black Americans represent just 13% of the population, okay? White Americans represent 60% of the population. So if you walk into a room and you find that there's only 13% of the room that is black American and 60% of the room is white American, you are actually walking into a room that is holistic, a room that actually represents America. You can't just say we want black Americans to represent 90% of people in every single room. It just won't work mathematically.
Candace Owens critiques woke teaching methods, advocates for educational reform.
I am so tired of talking about woke culture because one of the tenets of wokeness is, of course, that your feelings matter more than the truth. And the only thing that wokeness has to offer in exchange is to brainwash bright young minds like you to believe that you are victims. We are told that your generation cares more than any other about one issue in particular, and that issue is climate change. I will join you in worshipping at the feet of St. Greta of climate change. This country is responsible for 2% of global carbon emissions, which means that if Britain was to sink into the sea right now, it would make absolutely no difference to the issue of climate change. You know why? Because the future of the climate is going to be decided in Asia and in Latin America by poor people who couldn't give a about saving the planet. A third of all children who live in extreme poverty in the world live in India.
Konstantin Kisin debunks woke culture using well-researched facts.
Want to catch wokey moments in 4K? Watch till the end, subscribe, like the video, and comment wokies for a chance to win a brand new iPhone 16 or a cash prize. Also, don't forget to check out the next video on the end screen for more chances to win.